Marina. You're muted. FYI.
Okay,
The recording has started.
okay.
Do you just let everybody in? I guess I've never.
Am I co-host?
Yeah, I'm gonna make you co-host so that we both have
Okay.
capabilities. Yeah, and I'm just gonna leave it to you and let you pass it to me when it's time.
Giving the medals to.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Marina.
Hi, Jimmy. You made it.
Hi.
I made it.
Nice.
Hi, is Deborah Wars connected?
She's just coming in now.
Oh, good. What about Marion?
I
Marion
stay.
is here. Jimmy, you need to go up and change your view so you can see all the boxes. So up in the right-hand corner, the word view will appear.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
instead of it looking like you want it to look like a Rubik's Cube. So click on it until you see
yeah,
the.
got it. All right. Hello, everybody.
I'm going off video because I'm eating lunch, but I'm listening.
Okay.
Okay. Munch away.
I may slurp from time to time. Other than that, I'll be here.
Making us jealous again. How's it, Carl?
Hi there.
Hope you're well.
I am.
Yeah, good to
Good.
see you, Carl. Long
Thank
time
you.
no see. It's Marion.
I've been in and out, but I'm doing fine now.
Good, good.
Good.
Deb, I'm glad you could join us. I know Deb had to change her schedule today to make it possible to be here with us. So I appreciate that.
Right.
Right.
Well, Jimmy, I think if you want to gather us up, and I don't know if there's anything you want to share while we wait for anybody else that might be coming before we get started.
Okay, well, aloha, everybody, and thank you for joining us. It's an important meeting, really. And it's a gateway meeting, I would say, to the book review that's coming up in October. And I hope everyone can sign on for that. And then encourage others to sign on as well. Because the Mindful Warrior Project is a very important part of what Mindful Hawaii wants to accomplish as we go along into the future. And the more warriors we have, the bigger the network we have, the more we can spread the word. And I'm so happy to see that Marina will be leading the development of that part of the project, and that'd be great. And Jess, thanks for helping.
All right. Well, let me just start by saying some things that I know I've said before, but we never know who exactly is with us each time. So as Jimmy mentioned, this session is really sort of a launch again of our efforts to move toward this Mindful Warrior project, which is the engine that will help us organize the community around mindfulness, I guess is the way we might put it. And part of the challenge of launching, relaunching, waiting to launch is sort of finding the hands that will help. If we launch something, can we sustain it and maintain it? And we've had a bit of a shifting set of key players that have been coming and going. And so just when we think we're ready to launch, there's a hesitation on my part about what can I carry if we don't have enough other people around to help make something meaningful happen. And so for part of that, that's why it might feel like Groundhog Day that we're always talking about, we're about to make this thing happen. But things continue to evolve and grow with it. And along with that is my thinking about, given the dilemma of what can we do that's manageable, and yet it has reach, and we can be inclusive and make something viable happen. Some ideas have emerged around techniques we might use, ways we might support those who come forward to be part of this Mindful Warrior project. And today is a chance for us to experience one of those ways, which is the use of a circle process as a forum for conversation and connection around our humanity. So Jess is really going to be leading us through much of today, giving us a little lesson in what circles are and where they come from and how they're done. And then we'll have a circle. For the majority of our time, we'll go in rounds of taking turns in a conversation that she's going to guide us through. But in saying that, I just want to back up a minute and talk about how this is, we'll talk afterwards about its value to Mindful Hawaii, but I want to sort of say more about the book series that we're beginning. And we do hope that those of you on the call might think about joining us for 3 short months of talk, of learning together and reflecting together about Margaret Wheatley's book, Who Do We Choose to Be?, which sort of begins with the premise of the degradation and the dissolution of society as we've known it, and without too much emotion about the idea that that's happening. And then her book is really about what do we do in a time like this? What does it mean to be useful, in service? How do you not work on things that don't make sense because they're falling apart and don't need to be you working to hold them up? But how do you make room for what wants to emerge, and how do you hold on to humanity as this happens? Because it's going to become an increasingly difficult time to be human. So the idea of warriors, as she describes it, is born out of the Shambhala tradition of a more idealized society, and the notion that in difficult times warriors arise. And it's a way for people who want to be in service in the moment to imagine a role for themselves, which is to keep themselves able to have insight and compassion. And we know that meditation is meant to help us have clear sight and compassion. And so she talks about those as being the warrior's skillful means. And when she talks about warrior training, it's training yourself, often through meditation and the other skills needed to have equanimity in difficult times, because it's what people will need most from us, our ability to hold on to our humanity so that we can create spaces for them to live into their humanity. And that, as she says, even if we don't know what's coming next, we did the right thing in the now. We were doing the right thing in this now, even if we can't guarantee what comes next. So that's what she describes as right work. And anyone willing and wanting to do that right work can step forward to engage as a warrior in this time. So one of the key concepts that we'll look at in this 3 months of study is really unpacking what we mean by warrior-ship, developing personal understanding of that, and developing a collective shared sense of what we mean by that, so that we can all be ambassadors of this message and invite others to come and play with us in this work. The second big concept that she offers in the book is what she refers to as Islands of Sanity. And Islands of Sanity are the creation of intentional spaces where we hold on to our humanity, where we treat each other well, that we step away from what's happening in the outer world of aggression and struggle, and we create a place of peace with one another. And it's a metaphoric concept, but it's meant to be an actual thing you would try to create, join where they already exist, or offer to lead in a space by gathering people wherever you work, live, in your home, in your community, and try and help create an opportunity for people to recall, reignite their commitment to their own humanity and their connection with each other. It's kind of that simple. And so the idea of using circles, which are something that's really Jess will talk more about it, and we'll talk more after the session about why circles. But in the absence of many people to do the work of what we're imagining, circles seemed like an easy way we might be able to lift up this idea and allow people to develop some skills and a way that they can walk out into the worlds that they occupy and offer to help others create islands of sanity through the use of circle conversations. And so today we just want to have a chance to experience a circle, think later about how it might support the idea of building islands of sanity and the parts we can each play in being part of islands or even creating islands beyond this as part of the Mindful Warrior Project. And today it's just a chance for us to connect in our humanness while we comfortably learn to experience each other through a circle dialogue. So again, the Margaret Wheatley study does not presume that you've had to read the book. There's tons of content on her website, on YouTube, in her videos. There are many articles she's written. You may have read other books she's written. We welcome everyone. If you know of someone in the group, you're wondering where they've been, you might reach out to them and invite them back in for this 3-part series. It will meet the first Wednesday of each of the next 3 months, September, October, November, and December. And we hope that by the end of that, we've formed a bit of a group that is interested in the Mindful Warrior Project to help us sort of put meat on the bones of that idea and make it a more viable reality for us. So this is we have a few months to deepen our understanding and elevate our interest in what we can do with this work and how we can help breathe life into Mindful Hawaii by doing it. And with that, I just want to thank everybody who's joined us since we started talking. I was just giving some background on the Margaret Wheatley book study series that will be over the next 3 months and how this talk today is connected to that. Sorry if you missed it, but we do have this recorded. And so if you want to gather the recording and come back and hear that little piece, I'd be happy to, we'll be sharing it with you after the fact. And with that, Jimmy, you have anything else you want to say before we turn this over to Jess to get us going?
Oh, just to say to those who just joined us, welcome, aloha, and your participation is very important to the overall process. So again, thank you for joining us.
Great.
Jess?
Helen.
Mariana?
Okay, I was just hearing from Helen that she saw that the book is in the local library. She's going to be reading it, though she may have a conflict about joining us on those calls, but it's possible that we may be able to record them as well. We'll see how the group feels about that, if you'd be interested.
Okay, good.
Okay, thanks. Jess, what have you got for us?
Sure. So I just wanted to talk, I don't know if it's so much as teaching, it's just sharing what I know about circles. They're really an indigenous practice that's practiced by many cultures and many regions for many, many, many more years than I've ever even been alive. So I just want to share what I know, which is that it's a facilitated, guided approach, like talk story approach to having delicate, I guess is what I would say, conversations that have diverse points of view that are about a certain issue, that just raise a level of vulnerability that we're not often using in our daily life, that we need a safe space to be able to talk about. The process has been kind of westernized. It's used in like a lot of different settings now, and there's like big words about it and restorative justice and a lot of like process and things around it, but it really just comes down to creating a safe space for vulnerable topics to be spoken into a space and to be heard by others. And it assumes and promotes equal worth of everyone who's in the conversation, that everyone can bring their full humanness, their emotions, their experiences, their perspectives, And it values all of those voices and experiences equally. So I don't know if you think about like a traditional meeting and in your workplace, it's like conference table style, someone's at the head. And in a circle, the shape is so important because there is no start or end of a circle. And there's nothing's higher or lower than anybody else. Everyone's in the same level, everyone's sitting in the same, and if we were in the same space, that's how we would be sitting today when you do circles. And we'd all be sitting not at a table and not with anything in our laps and not with anything in our hands, so that we're physically open to one another. And the space is warm and different. We're not hiding behind notebooks, laptops, tables, paperwork, things that you can use to kind of guard yourself against others. It's just like a way of being open. Like when you meditate, and if you're someone who sits with their hands open to what's happening, it's bringing yourself to that process. And then the process is pretty simple, though it's intentional. It's planned. So I've spent a lot of time like thinking about Marina and I talked about the prompts we might use and what we might discuss, but also these different aspects of it. So the process is we'll take turns answering a prompt. Because we're not sitting in a space where we know the order, I'm just going to drop in the chat the list of our names, and hopefully everyone has access to that and can see. And if not, I'll try to help call out names so we can all know when it's our turn. So then there's a circle keeper, that's me today. And I planned this, and I'm going to help guide this conversation. But really, it's going to be self-managed, because before we start, we're going to talk about a set of guidelines for how we'll come here today, some shared values. And then if we were together, we'd have a talking piece that everyone would pass, and that would just tell you when it's your turn to share versus when it's your turn to receive what someone has shared. And the last thing that's kind of special about a circle and different than just a meeting or taking turns when you speak is that it's marked by an opening and a closing ceremony. And our focus and our intention is centered by a centerpiece. So if we were in a room together, I might have a blanket in the middle. I might have put some pieces of maybe a candle, something we can all look at. And today I'll just share an image on the screen. A little bit about why I love circles. I was trained in circles in like 2018, right before the pandemic. And I fell in love with this process because it is about bringing your full self, your mind, your body, your spirit into a conversation, and then allowing and expecting other people to do the same, which I just don't think is typical these days, especially in like our more professional spaces or spaces where there's a lot of differences of opinion. Because when there's the more diversity, the more option for conflict, and so the less we say. And circles just like invite that and expect that. And that's what we need right now. It's really important. In order to have a delicate conversation about our differences, about our conflicts, about our fears, we need to know that it's a safe place that we can share diverse perspectives, our personal experiences, and have a full range of emotion and just be our full selves. I think that's all that I like to say about circles before I kind of talk about our process. Marina, do you have anything you want to say that has to do with Mindful Hawaii and using this, or can I?
I don't think so, other than for folks that came in late. We're demonstrating what a circle is. And as we move on into the Margaret Wheatley study group and move into the Mindful Warrior Project, we'll be looking for the possibility that circles could be a useful tool for advancing the goals of the Mindful Warrior Project, because it's a replicable way of creating community that you don't have to be a high-level expert to participate in or to create the space and offer to others. So it's considered as a potential device that we would use to help organize our community toward mindfulness.
Thanks, Marina. Okay, so then I would like to share what I have proposed be our guidelines today for how we'll gather in this space. So I'm going to ask that everyone share what you would like to, what feels comfortable from your own perspective and experience, and that everyone else receive what is shared with curiosity and respect. The stories that people share in the circle need to stay in the circle, but if you've learned a lesson from someone's story, please take that with you into the world. That's why we're here. We have let's see, I can't do quick math, 12 people and not an unlimited amount of time. So take the time that you need to share into the space and make sure that you leave time for others to share as well. And then I'm going to ask that we be present for others in all senses, but I'm going to talk about some technical specifics since we're on Zoom, which just means if you can have your camera on, it'll be better that we're not talking into a void, that there's people there receiving. And as Helen put in the chat, keeping your mic off so we don't have interfering sounds. If you have phone or notifications on your computer that might distract you, it's just about like being really present and mindful here for one another. And is everyone able to use their audio today? Is everyone going to be able to speak into the everyone? I'm kind of looking to Amy and Lisbeth because I can't see you. So as long as you guys are okay turning on your audio, that should be okay. I'm not sure, but that's the point, is to be able to share. So that's it for guidelines. And then if I could, yes, Deb.
Thanks, Jess. I'm excited for today. And I just had a question about using the chat. Are there any guidelines around that?
So if we were in a room, it's really about just sharing your experience. So I guess it depends what you want to use the chat for. If you have a technical problem, feel free to chat me. But as far as like responding to other people's things or adding on, this really is a space for your self-expression. So we're really here to listen and just share our own experience rather than like commenting on what other people are saying. So it'd be great if we kept the chat to tech. And if you want to just chat me, I'm the host, so I'll have whatever capabilities are probably needed. Thanks, Deb. I will add that to my list.
Yes, before we go on, can we check with Elizabeth and Amy that they are actually there? So, and able to turn off their mutes and on with their mics.
Yep,
Oh, I see
I'm
their
here.
mics go off.
And I'm, I'm switching over to my computer now. I'll have the camera on.
Okay, great. So you're here with us. It's not, you're just not, you haven't walked away someplace. Great. Good to know.
No, I'm here. Yep.
Thank you. And I guess that's true for Richard too, right? That's the only other person we haven't. Richard, are you there?
Richard's here. Just had to leave for a second.
Okay, great.
No problem. So, okay, the next thing that I'll talk about is the shared values. If we were an existing circle and we met a lot, we would probably come up with these together, but in interest of time, I'm setting these intentions for us. So I think today what we would need to have a really good conversation is to be kind to one another, to be curious about each other's perspectives and our own, to be courageous enough to speak into the space and present. So if those guidelines and those values sound good, maybe I can just get like a thumbs up from people. So I know we're all interested in volunteering to participate, because the most important thing about circles is that it's voluntary. So if it does come to your turn and you need to pass or you wish not to share, that's fine. But we're hoping it's a safe enough space that you'll want to. I have a centering image that I'll share in a moment. I also have a talking piece. If you have something in your space that you'd like when it's your turn to hold on to, I'm just going to share that. I often like to use a rock, and this one actually says peace on it, which is pretty. But I like to use a rock because they're heavy. And it kind of grounds you in a way. It's like when you're having a difficult something you have to share, to have something in your hands to fidget with is always nice, but something that's kind of like grounding and it's natural, it's like of the earth. So that's my talking piece. And our center, yes.
Do you want to give people a second to grab a piece if they want to?
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
I'm going to do that.
The last order of business, Marina knows this, so I'm just going to say this, is that I'm going to put the speaking order in the chat. And hopefully everyone can then access the chat and see it. And I think I got everybody, except Marion, since there's two of you, one of you can go first and pass to the other. Okay, great. All right. Our centering image today is the peaceful warrior yoga pose, which we're talking about being mindful warriors, and yoga is my practice of choice. And I just think it's a really beautiful image, but it's something we can all focus on. And if everybody's ready, I'm going to open the circle with a quick quote from Margaret Wheatley. When we seek for connection, we restore the world to its wholeness. Our seemingly separate lives become meaningful as we discover how truly necessary we are to each other. Okay, and our first prompt that we're going to answer, and I'll begin, and then we'll pass to Marina, and then to Helen, to Carl, etc. This first prompt is to tell us about a time or a more general context in which it's hard for you to hold on to your sanity and humanity, and what that impact was on you. Okay, so I'll begin. The times that it's hardest for me to hold on to my humanity is certainly when someone has a very different perspective than me or view, and expresses it without any room for rebuttal. I think it's really hard when people have really aggressive or like really staunch views that are really different than mine. And what's hard for me in that moment, the impact it has on me, is actually I shut down and I don't know how to respond or how to share. And that impact is just that, like, my view doesn't get heard, and that person doesn't have the experience of hearing what I think. And I don't have the experience of a conversation with that person. And then, because if that happens over and over again, I might start to avoid that person, and I might start to avoid conversations like that. And yeah, it's disconnecting. I'm going to pass this to Marina. You're muted, Marina.
I had a dog rush in here right in the middle of you talking, I'm dog sitting, and he just arrived. So I don't know if you could see him, but he's on my lap right now. And that's so nice. It's even better than the thing I went to grab, a centering piece. I actually have a very clear memory that was just as the George Floyd Summer of Social Justice was happening. And I think I was in a permanent amygdala hijack from COVID and politics and everything else. And I went for a weekend with college friends, and a college friend who had always sort of flirted with racist comments, but more performatively, almost like, am I going to get in trouble if I say this thing? And he would, because I would call him out on it all the time. He was really struggling with, some of the issues that were going on, and we found ourselves on opposite sides of the moment. And I was so disappointed. I had always been disappointed in that aspect of him, and I love him dearly. But I didn't really think he meant it. I thought he was kind of teasing at it, even though it's not a funny thing to tease about. But I thought he was kind of just, was kind of pretending he was stuck there, but I thought he had moved on. But in this moment, I realized he had not really moved on, and he was on the other side of issues from me. And I grew so angry, and I heard myself really loudly. We were in the woods. I was really loud, and I was calling him a racist, like full volume, repeatedly. And I could feel the cortisol and the adrenaline rushing through me. I could see how hurt he was, how he was so embarrassed, shocked that I would talk to him like that I would say all this in front of our other friends. And it was a really big part of me realizing that I needed to reset and return to a deeper commitment to mindfulness, because I was really unregulated and I was hurtful. And it took a long time for us to sort of recover from that. It was bad. And I pass to Helen.
Okay, give me 1 second just to close my door. I'm sorry, I didn't want to leave while Marina was speaking. The thing that came up for me with this question was a time of caregiving for a partner who was terminally ill and trying to figure out how to maintain my sanity in that situation and be discerning about what is selfish, what is self-care, what is codependency, what is appropriate and what is not. And I was caregiving for 2 generations at the same time. And I, got pretty close to losing it, I think, trying to sort all that stuff out, because if I got through a day and got my teeth brushed, I figured that was a great success. And now, because I've been ill for a while, I'm in a position of needing to be caregiven sometimes. And that is tough because I know what the other is going through. And so it's a struggle. It's a struggle for me to sort out sanity and insanity, frankly, to have the freedom to be healthy and the freedom to be sick without imposing that burden on others. So that's kind of where I am actually at this very moment in my life. A reboot from maybe over a decade ago, and now coming back around where I'm on the other end of the stick. So the question is right on target for me. Thank you.
If
Thank
you're
you.
not looking in the chat, the next person is Carl. The list is in the chat and it shows you what order people go in if you weren't following that.
Yeah.
It's Carl, then Elizabeth, then James.
Here I am. Am I up?
You're up.
Okay. Guess what? As this conversation has begun, got me thinking about is what I consider a deficit of myself in a way. I have, well, we have many forms of discrimination. The obvious ones are racial, but in some cases, the cause for that discrimination is hidden. And that's, in a way, the case with myself, certainly earlier in my life. I'm a gay man. And I went through many trials in trying to hide that from individuals that I suspected would not be accepted, which was almost everybody. And it went so far, it began in high school, I recall. reading articles that were written for, I think, for gay men to indicate what types of gestures and so on and verbalizations would expose you as a gay man. So how do you hold your books when you go to class? And I mean, there's a whole series, and I studied these books in great detail. But that's a little off the point, because the point I really want to make is my own personal shame, not for being gay, but for not knowing how to educate, I guess is the word. When I would encounter people, which is very common, who would make very derogatory statements about gays, disparaging remarks, and so on. And I didn't speak out. Now, later I thought, well, I should confront them. I should confront people to do that. But that's not the right solution. I know that. Even to this day, there has to be a way of, without being belligerent, without being aggressive, of providing a learning experience for other people of this ilk. And I don't know what that is. I don't know how to do it. And that has been a perennial struggle. And of course, in this day and age, homosexuality is become much more normalized. But it's still the case that one encounters individuals. And the broader question, how do you ever interact with people that you have fundamental disagreements with without being negative, without being aggressive? How do you do it? I think that the key is how to make it a learning experience, but I don't know how to do it. So anyway, that's what I have to say at this point.
Looks like Elizabeth has gone.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. I'm sorry,
I'm
Elizabeth.
wondering if I can be next. I'm still having some technical problems switching to my computer, and I'm almost there, and I'd rather go and everything when I speak.
Okay.
If the next person can go, and then I'll
And I think James left, so it's Deb. We'll pass to Deb.
I'm having a really hard time coming up with a specific time, and it feels like a really heavy question. So I'll just turn to the present moment, which is I'm having a hard time holding on to my sanity and my humanity right now. I recently had a very close friend pass away, died unexpectedly. And it's been challenging to kind of make sense of that. And it's kind of clouding my entire world right now. And I would say that so I guess the confusion about what is the purpose of living in this world? And it seems like everything's a shit show right now. Politically, wars happening, the climate collapse, everything's collapsing. And so, I think every day is an attempt to hold on to humanity and sanity, quite honestly. And when I think about my whole life, when I was younger, I was definitely a very outspoken advocate on a lot of different social justice issues, and both professionally and personally. And I always had a lot of fire and anger and push behind that. And it doesn't, it's not very effective most of the time. And at least it wasn't for me, and it's exhausting. So, those are some consequences of that. And I would say the other thing that popped into my mind was the polarities that were revealed during the pandemic, vaccine, no vaccine, mask, no mask, like just on and on. And I really lost patience with some people during that time, and particularly over social media. And there have been times when I've said things that, out of anger or too hastily, and came with some regret. So those are some of my thoughts at the moment. And I'll pass it to, looks like Lisbeth is still not ready yet, so I will pass it to Marian.
Aloha mai kakou. I think we could just rewind the recording to what Jess said, and that would be my answer. I would say that avoidance denial when there's conflict. And there's some in my family with in-laws, and I find when my husband, who can approach his family with just on a telephone conversation or even in person, I leave the room. And they're actually able to have civil conversations, but it's still people with opposing views. And I just shrink from that. We were back visiting the family last month, and I was proud of myself on a couple of occasions when I was able to stay with one particular, incident and state my view, and where a kind of a little light went off in their minds. And but generally speaking, I mean, that was way out of my comfort zone. So that's whenever there's some kind of conflict of, and then I make assumptions. My husband says, don't assume just because you like somebody that they have the same ideas that you do. And I'll do that. I was having such a wonderful time with a cousin who was visiting from New York, and I took her to Waiola's shave ice because we had gone to Kailua Beach, and I was trying to teach her how to bodyboard. She's a fantastic swimmer. The waves not so much her thing, but so I took her to Waiola, and I said, this was Barack Obama's favorite place to get shave ice, and she looked at me, and she said, "Do you like Barack Obama?" I said, "Oh my gosh, we went to the same school," and yes. And she says, "Oh, because we hate him." And I was I changed the subject. Couldn't even go there. I had no idea where to go from there. I was just so shocked. I thought everybody liked Barack Obama. So anyway, this is my husband, Art, and I'm going to let him jump in.
Yeah, this has always been a paradox to me. I grew up, I had a dad who was an expert on everything, know-it-all, and very dogmatic. And we used to argue into the night, and it would become very heated. And I think it took a long time in retrospect to realize I had actually learned a lot from him, despite the fact that he never gave an inch on what I thought were his ridiculous ideas. And he was, even as my father, I come from a working class family, and I'm one of the few people in the family that got a college education. So I'm the woke elite, educated person who doesn't really know anything. And the difference is what I learned with my father is that we all kind of get locked into thinking we really know what we know. And so I took a degree in physics, and science taught me that just about all our knowledge is provisional. We are absolute truth. I accept the fact that absolute truth is beyond me. So, but I still have this reaction when people that I meet talk as if they've cornered the market on truth. And as soon as I say, well, I'm not sure that's true, I've weakened my position right from the beginning, because it opens the door for an ad hominem attack. And then once that happens, the conversation is shattered. And so I've been trying to figure out how to engage in a conversation, and I'm guilty of all the things that I accuse other people of, and separate a claim, an idea, a thought, an opinion, or even something that you're prepared to argue because it's in my field is physics. So if I mention that, the one thing I do know something about is physics, eyes roll back in people's heads, and that's the end of that conversation. So I'm always feel like I'm out of my league anyway when I talk politics or anything else. But I used to like Will Rogers, who used to say, all I know is what I read in the newspaper. And that's what most of us, that's all we know, because few of us are in the room where it happened. And I'm trying to figure out how to get the ad hominem attack thing off the table and say, look, there's a claim on the table. Let's focus on that. And I think the people that have a lot to teach us about how to do that, the high school debate teams and the rules that they have for debating, you research, if you rather than throwing out a baseless opinion, which gets, we waste a lot of time arguing about things that we don't know anything about. Try to research something that is going to come up in a conversation, and take a lesson from the debaters. So I regret that I never got into debating when I was a kid, and I wished I had, because there's some good rules in the debating process that I think that could help us all to recover the lost art of conversation, if there really ever was a real art of conversation. But I think there is. I see it happening under certain groups of people, graduate students that sit around tables
Right now.
and are researching a lot of stuff. And the attempt that I see that's happening here that's really needed. We spend most of the time in our bubbles, and I look forward to talking to people who disagree with me, because if they can show me that I'm carrying a wrong idea around in my head, then I'm thankful that I get it weeded out and move on. But it really gets to that point. So I'm looking for ways to save what seems like the lost art of conversation, and I'm really waffling through life trying to make some headway on that, because the way that people respond when they feel challenged is not conducive to conversation. So that's how I'm really happy to have the chance to say something here and listen to what you folks are saying. And thanks for letting me sit here next to my wife to do this.
Pass on to Richard.
Thank you. So one really big experience and time in my life was serving on a board. It was a church board. And the mission of this particular organization was to raise the consciousness of the world. And what I observed in working, especially with the leadership, and there are exceptions, but generally, people that held positions of authority didn't adhere to the values that they preached. So my judgment was, my God, what a bunch of hypocrites. And that was like so discouraging, you know? I was really looking forward to a sense of community. And I was dismayed also, and a little melancholy, irritated, that didn't help, and disappointed. So this all pointed towards what I was looking for. Why was I engaging with this group or not? And I was really looking for a spiritual sense of community, but it required for me spiritual authenticity. Not just authenticity in general, but spiritual authenticity, which would allow me to live within a community I trusted. And I really value honesty in relationships. I value reliability. So that was a really big disappointing time in my life, but I learned a lot from it. Now, I do want to say there are some bright spots, and I mean some individuals and organizations that are really there. And there's unfortunately others that fall into that judgment of hypocrites. And of course, that doesn't help with the mindset thinking these guys are hypocrites when you're sitting in a board meeting. How well does that go, right? So it tends to affect your behavior. But in the same, it's interesting though, because the same organization provided a tool via a visiting minister, and that tool was nonviolent communication. And it was, to me, I found to be a wonderful tool.
NVC.
And it just really takes care of all the issues that I was running into, as well as probably would take care of all the issues of those that have spoken this afternoon before me and probably after me. But it's a compassionate form of communication. And empathy is what's involved, connecting with empathy. So it's about the relationship. So funnily enough, this minister that passed through dropped this program in the midst of all this chaos at this church. And that's what an amazing tool that is. So I really grew from that, and I was very grateful to have that, because it really helps in relationships and family and organizations and churches, you name it. It's just really, really life enhancing. And it reminds me of Rumi, one of those famous quotes of Rumi, if I got it right. He says, beyond right and wrong, there's a field. I will meet you there. What is he pointing to? And then as in the Course in Miracles, love makes no comparisons. So getting in that connection with others first, and then moving towards resolution, debate, and strategies, to me is a very important part of actually doing anything in life and connecting with it. It is a labor of love. It's not easy. None of us probably were trained for that. Most people were not. We live a very different life, living in illusion with egoic ideas and laws about ourselves and others. So anyway, that's my bottom line. But thank you for listening. And I believe it goes on to Amy, or did we want to double back for someone else that was waiting? I'm open to who you want to go next. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's we'll move to Jimmy, Roger, and then Lisbeth at the end. And Lisbeth said she lost the question when she signed back on. So it's tell us about a time or context when it was hard for you to hold on to your sanity and humanity. What was that impact on you and others? And Jimmy, it's up to you.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
We can hear you, Jimmy.
Okay. Well, I was trying to think about a context in which it would be difficult, or was difficult, for me to hold on to my sanity and my humanity. And I don't know why, but 1965 flashed into my mind. During the 60s, as you know, the Vietnam War was raging on, and all of us were trying to figure out what we're going to do with respect to our involvement in this process. But for me, it was simple because I was about to get drafted and I had to get out of the way. So I joined the reserve system, the Air Force Reserve System. But becoming a member of the reserve system, I had to sign up and be sent off to basic training. So I was in basic training, and part of the basic training consisted of battlefield conditions. And I remember this part of training where we had to crawl about 40, 50 yards in a minefield. Now, of course, this is an artificial minefield, but we all had to crawl about that length of distance for 40 to 50 yards under barbed wire. And as we crawled, there were bomb bursts, mine bursts, if you will. And these were real bursts, but not, it was contained in a barrel of sorts, but you could hear the barrel, the explosion, and you could feel the concussion coming from it. And on top of that, there were above us, above the barbed wire we were crawling under, there were gunfire, machine gun. And all of us who went through that were wondering, what the hell are we doing this for? Are we going to be living in the next couple of days, the next minute or two? So, the imagination starts running and you're wondering whether you're going to be alive or not. And in that kind of instance, I'm not too sure whether, it was very difficult to hang on to your civil sanity, if you will. All you think about is your own survival. And so as you crawl through this 40 or 50 yards with explosions going on and the gunfire above you, you're wondering, boy, what does it take to survive? And is survival under that kind of condition worthwhile? And you not only lose your mind in a sense of being civil in your thinking, because all you're thinking about is making it through and surviving. And the question becomes: are you concerned about your fellows that are going through the same thing? I'm not too sure whether it was there was much thought about their survival except for yours. And but anyway, that's the kind of condition that the people are under. It'll be very difficult to even talk about intellectually what it means to have relationships and all that kind of stuff. But still, that kind of talk and that kind of discussion is very important because it means whether we can survive as a group of people, humanity can survive. And I think brings to mind that any kind of discourse, any kind of thinking that brings you to the question of what should you do as a human being, I think that's very important. But anyway, I hear a lot of talk, on the national broadcast, I hear a lot of people, talking about things, and I'm just wondering whether or not, what would happen to these people if they were subjected to the same kind of threats to life under that kind of circumstances where bombs are bursting right next to you? And what would be your thoughts? What would be their thoughts? And I think if they put themselves in that kind of position, I think they may come forward with a little bit different kind of thinking, I think. not so much vicious and vile, but I think they would be wondering what should we do? You know, do we continue to hang on to the positions we have, or are we going to try and facilitate understanding through conversation, somehow? But anyway, it's a tough world we live in, and we're all going to need each other to make it through. Not just us, but humanity as a whole. Thank you for letting me talk. Oh, I'll pass it on to Roger. Hey, Roger.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay.
Haven't seen you in a long time.
I haven't seen you in a long time, too.
We haven't seen each other in a long time.
I know.
It's good to see you.
Are you back in Hawaii for a while now, or?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm leaving in October, but when I get back, let's go to Zippy's again.
Okay, sounds good. Make it, that's the deal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This is a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the heartfelt discussion and some really great things. I flunked physics one time and I took it over and thought I was had done really well on the first exam, and I got a D. And I switched from a mathematics major to business. And that caused me to become a lawyer. But I really appreciate what you said about your father's domination and how it helped you. Because when I look at myself, I see changes that I've gone through since I was, I don't know when I started really thinking about these things, certainly by college. And to where I am now, 55 years later, it's so different that it's hard for me to see how I could form an opinion so clearly about things that are opinions as opposed to facts, and just be so certain I was right anymore. And I do have biases like everybody else. I am a pretty liberal person, even though I was a international corporate tax lawyer for 55 years. I kind of see both sides, I think. And what I've found is in the last some years, I don't get in a fight, but I feel myself getting riled up when somebody says Trump is a good person, And when I feel that, I can go to all my mindfulness wisdom and say, look, that's his opinion. Maybe right, maybe wrong. I have my opinion. And I haven't gotten in a fight with anybody in a long, long time. I think you got to retrench when your body's telling you, this isn't where you want to go. And I think, Marina, you had a really good story about that. And in hindsight, when you started getting angry, you should have pushed your own button on reset and enough already, and find the things you loved about that person. Frankly, I'm in a serious relationship with a woman who voted for Trump twice. That may be well, I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff like that going on. But I really think I was involved with the Joseph Campbell Foundation for many years. And one of Campbell's great sayings was, "In your darkest cave lies your greatest treasure." And to me, we're in such a transition. We're in, I don't know how many thousands of years that women have been held down and now freed up for 50, 60 years to kind of be their own thing. In the United States, 150 years ago, a woman couldn't even own property. So how does that change? Black people were slaves. I lived in Washington, D.C. in the 60s when, it was terrible. the things that were said, the things that were done to people. And now I'm looking at two women in the country who have had the guts to go after Trump, two women lawyers who are Black, the woman in New York and the woman in Georgia. And I'm seeing so much Black leadership in our country. It's like, what happened? And what happened was we went through a change. So I'm very encouraged by where we are now, because I think we need huge changes. I think our whole society is so screwed up that the only way we're going to get there is to dig down into this deep cave and find a way out. And I would like to be part of the solution, but I sure don't have the answer. And so I do think that being nice to people is a good idea. I had a conversation last night with a couple who are very devout Christians. And the woman is very up in a libertarian community. And I've been a tax lawyer. They hate paying taxes. And so we had a really nice conversation about the things we agreed on. And I do think that's possible everywhere. So for me, I would like to, and I tell you the truth, the peaceful, Jimmy knows, the term peaceful warrior was one of the reasons I stopped hanging out at mindfulness, because I don't like the idea of being a warrior. I know it's a peaceful warrior, but I still don't want to kill anybody or hurt anybody. Because I think we're all connected. I think we gotta, and I also know my view is not a really strong, I mean, I'm 77 years old. I had my whole career. I'm well set financially. I kind of got everything. How can I even know what it feels like to be in somebody else's shoes who's down south feeling like they lost all their jobs and whatever. So I'm rambling and I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, but I do really appreciate this good conversation. And I certainly like being a part of a group that wants to solve the problems. And I think mindfulness has been wonderful for me over the years. And I think Jimmy's done a great job bringing this group together. So anything I can do to help. And I just want to drop in today to see what was going on and if I can participate in some way. Thanks.
Hey, Roger, Jimmy. I'm glad that you dropped in, and I'm glad that didn't overlook, but I mean, sort of bypass the idea of the warrior, and we need to talk about that some more. So maybe that would be a good subject at our Zippy's lunch, maybe. Huh?
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so I guess I'm just going to start off by just saying, I guess it's really hard for me to be doing this on a Zoom, especially because I can't see everybody. So I feel it just feels really weird to me to be trying to share like this in a way where can't see people. I feel like I'm sure I've had many.
Liz, can I just ask you a second? If you take the image that Jess put up on the screen and there's a little white line to the right of it and slide that bar over, you'll be able to see everybody.
So
if
I couldn't figure it out. I kept.
You can recover.
Now I can see everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry if anybody
that-
else didn't know how to do that either. You can make the image she put up much smaller and make all of our boxes bigger.
Yeah, it was all I was seeing was this. Either I had a speaker and I could just see the speaker in a little box, or just a few people. So thank you so
Okay.
much. I'm glad I said that. Thank you. I was just going to say, I know I've had many circumstances, probably kind of similar to Marina's story. But what comes to my mind, what really, when that question came up, what I thought of was a situation that happened to me yesterday evening, where I feel like there was a little bit of a shift in me, because I was walking with my neighbors, and they're very, very privileged, and they were talking about, you know, somebody stealing mail from the mailbox, and they, you know, it actually happened to my landlord. Our rent check was stolen along with some other rent checks, and they said, what should we do about it? And she said they should be shot. And normally, and this is a kind of conversations they often have, and I just feel I get so triggered and I get so angry, and I will often just kind of spout out kind of defensive language, and you know, I feel myself being very defensive and edgy and angry, but at the same time trying to maintain some sense of connection, and trying to just try to have them see a different way, but I'm doing it in a way that I'm coming from a place of really triggered. And yesterday when they said that, I got really triggered. And then I just stopped, and I just kept my mouth quiet. And I just felt like, to me, that was a really big change, because it's like the next step for me to where I can start to have the kind of conversation I really want to have, where I can just ask questions and not, you know, be more of a nonviolent communication instead of coming from my own place of being triggered. And I feel myself being really revved up right now, even just thinking of the conversation. And I think the anger comes from this sense of injustice, because there is a complete lack of understanding of what other people have to go through to survive, and the trauma that people have undergone, and the lack of privilege that they have, that these people are so completely clueless about. And so the trigger for me is that injustice, but I don't want to be spouting back and arguing. I want to ask questions and try to meet them and try to understand their point of view. You know, I know they're coming from a place of fear. So to me, that was just a really, I've had many conversations like this with them, where I don't think I've like lost my humanity. I've lost my sanity for sure. But I feel like a little glimmer of hope, because that was the first time I could actually just stop and just settle my nervous system before I would even, you know, before I would go any further. And that was a big change for me, because it's not just with them, you know, it's with other situations and people. And yeah, it was just a real awakening for me. And that it's like, oh yeah, I can just do that, and then come from that place of a more settled nervous system than coming from the, you know, reactive, where it just becomes nobody's hearing anyone and no one's listening, and there's no connection. So that's my story. I hope it continues.
Thanks, Lisbeth. Thanks, everyone. So we plan to wrap up at 2:45. So our next question, we're going to flip, and we're going to let's all think about a time where we were challenged, but we did manage to hang on to our sanity in the moment when it was hard. And the question is, what did it take, and what was the impact? What did it take to be able to hang on, and what was the impact of that? And we're going to use the same order. For me, the last time I was able to hang on in a place that is typically hard, in a conversation with my little sister, whom I love and worry about. When we started our conversation, I just set an intention that what would be helpful to her in those moments was more empathy and questions than advice and worry. I just set my intention, and instead of losing it to my fear of what decision she might make or where she might go or what might happen to her, I was like, you know, she's an adult. Why don't I'm going to intend, I'm going to expect that I'm going to feel this way, because I know it's going to happen, because it's happened before. So I'm going to know it's going to happen, and then intend to just do it differently. And I could feel the impact on her of her feeling more relaxed in telling me. And I think it shifted what she expected me to say. She probably expected the worry and the lecture and the judgment. And I think it probably made us closer. Yeah. I'm going to pass to Marina. Marina, you're muted.
Only 4 years into this pandemic and I still have to be reminded to unmute. I don't know if this is an important one, but it's a recent one, so I'll share it. I was off with some friends last weekend, and 2 of them were heading off to do something. We had 2 stand-up paddle boards, and there were 3 of us. They were heading off to paddle, and I felt the plan for it. I was fine with it, but somehow in the moment of it really happening, they were launching, I just got really big FOMO, fear of missing out. I just felt really like on the outside of something, and I got very small and unregulated, as a therapist would say. I could just feel my fussiness rise, and I wasn't feeling generous about what they were about to do, even though I was helping them do it. And I was embarrassed by the fact that I was having a big reaction of like resentment, that I wasn't part of what was happening. And how did that happen? And what, I don't even know what was happening. But I was in a situation where I was having to sort of mask. I was trying to mask my reaction, which was disappointment and irritation. And I didn't even really know what it was about, but I knew it didn't feel appropriate. And so they pushed off without me saying much, and probably with them sensing there was something wrong with me, but not knowing what it was. And I went, in the absence of doing that activity with them, I went and found a spot on the beach, and I had a conversation with myself. The best I could do in the moment was to not say anything, because I knew what I had to say would sound sour. So I was probably a little too quiet, and that revealed something. But then I went and sat with myself. I tried to inspect what the flurry of feelings were that were coming up for me, and whatever fears about, what that was about. Why was I feeling on the outside of this experience, which I volunteered to be on the outside when it started, but all of a sudden when it was happening, I wasn't okay with it. And I had to kind of unravel what that was about for me. I got in touch with some deeper fears about stage of life I'm in, changes to health, age, relevance, with itness. And then I thought about the situation and how my silence and surliness probably left them feeling unsettled as they pushed off, wondering what was wrong with me. I felt some compassion for that, for them, and gave myself some space, and then settled on gratitude. I moved to gratitude about what I was grateful for about that moment, that very singular moment, sitting on the beach where I was, like with the physical environment, with everything else. And then sort of did kind of a loving kindness kind of meditation and a gratitude gathering. And I really was able to adjust it was great that I had a place to go that was peaceful and safe. It was great that I had some time to process my feelings. And I had kind of forgotten about it by the time we hooked up again, but it was clear that they hadn't, because the first question that got asked was, "Are you all right?" And I was sort of taken back to the moment when I wasn't all right, which was the last moment they had seen me. And I realized they had spent that trip wondering if I was okay, and if they had some part of why I wasn't okay. And I was able to sort of go, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." But there was a whole story between the silent launch and the "I'm fine." And yeah, so that's just the story that came to mind for me when I thought about it. But I think it's a little instructive about what it took for me to notice and regain my humanity and my sanity. that would take us to you, Helen, if you have something you'd like to share.
Well, yeah, I'm resonating with so many of these stories. The phrase that comes up for me with the second question is, you know, that country song, know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away and know when to run. And I'm thinking of two stories now that are kind of related. One has to do with a change that I thought was possible and successful. And that was with my granddaughter, who's 35. And her boyfriend is a white Trumper. And how, and of course she's Black, and how not to engage. He's a nice guy, he loves her. I think she may be his exception to the rule. But I had to do a lot of self-talk about not parenting. She's 35 and she gets to choose her life, and she's a remarkable human being. And so for me, the challenge was holding him, know what not to say, how not to trust that she's a grown-up and take care of herself. And not to just throw him out with the bathwater, because he really is a nice guy and he loves her. He could be a jackass in other ways. So that was instructive to me. And I find myself often, and maybe in my line of work too, as a person, a Black woman who feels this deep compassion for white men who feel that they should be dominant and successful when they're not, and understanding their pain instead of just writing them off, and sometimes being more harmed within my community than outside of it. I don't expect anything from the quote other, but it breaks my heart if I'm treated poorly by my own, which can also happen. So that's one story of kind of holding, and I think with some success. We still talk several times a week, and we're doing fine, and she's doing fine, making some decisions. The other, hold them and folding them and walking away, is that I have a brother who is not for Trump, but he's very right-wing politically. He's a military Air Force pilot. He's a misogynist. And I have to stop waiting for the other to change. And at some point, I'll be 80 on my next birthday. Stop holding my breath, hoping this one can be fixed, because it's possible. I will stay open, but it's also possible that it doesn't get fixed. And that I don't have to explain or apologize or accept bad behavior. I have to be willing to say, maybe you just have to walk away. And it's okay, sort of with the story with the friends. So those are two, dealing with two situations similarly, because I'm really pretty far left-leaning politically, but really compassionate metaphysically. So I'm having to face my own challenges and demons. And did you mean it? When you said God is love or all is love, you know. So I'm having to deal with that all the time. And those, I think, are two examples, one kind of fixed and one not fixed, but both, I think, successful for my sanity and well-being, that I no longer have to be Miss Fix-It and solve all the world's problems. It's not on me, and the world is fine. It'll take care of itself. And that, to some extent, frees me. And I think that's the gift of the medical issues I'm dealing with is, I can't take care of everybody. I'm having a hard enough time taking care of myself. How am I going to take care of the world too? And so it's an interesting time. And I think I'm making peace with either of those options or all four of them, hold them, walk away and run when necessary. That I also know I had a former partner who told me about that. Don't get in the middle of that. Somebody's having a fight on a bus. You bring out your little umbrella or your purse and think you're going to stop a fight between two grown men. Not a time. Run. Or at least hold back. So I would consider those successes, even with varied outcomes. Okay, Carl, I think that's it for me. I'm passing. You're muted.
There we go. Okay. Actually, I guess 2 episodes for me that came to mind with this question. One, which I think, well, neither are completely successful, but one perhaps more successful than the other in handling these types of situations. The one where I did not feel I did a good job. And this was some time ago when the state legislature was considering, I guess, a Defense of Marriage Act. And I had gone up to the legislator and legislation, met with my legislator and others that I knew. And one, of course, I won't name, but I knew rather well because he had been a student of mine. And in a one-on-one seminar type of situation, I probably knew him very well. And I knew he had voted for or had expressed an intent to vote for the Defense of Marriage Act. And so I tried to lobby him a little bit. And he said to me, he said, Carl, you know me better than that my heart says that this is the way I should vote, but my constituency would never support that. And so I have to support their position in order to get reelected. And I just walked away on that. And that, I think, was a failure. But more recently, my ex-wife's husband, we were actually pretty close. And my ex-wife's husband is a staunch, they live in Arizona, he's a staunch Trump supporter. And I could recall he got into a conversation where he was talking about how we have to control the immigrants coming across the border, and it's a terrible problem in Arizona. And I made a conscious decision at that point to change the subject, just not talk about it. And instead, not only change the subject, but very deliberately talk about something that I could express support and admiration for him. So I asked him about himself, you know, about his job. And I was able to talk very positively about that and mean it. So there was a common ground in a way based upon his value system. In other words, I found something, I guess that's the way of expressing it. I found something in his value system that was also part of mine. And so the interaction ended very positively. There was no resolution whatsoever on the disagreement concerning immigrants at the border. But at least the interaction ended, I think, positively and in the right direction. So those are my thoughts and, you know, to this question. So I don't, who's next? I don't get a list of the chat.
I'm next. Thank you, Carl. This is Deb. So a time that I could hold on to my sanity and humanity. I think that a couple of things that popped up into the two things that popped up into my mind are, or three. There are people that I've really loved in my life who were, you know, super important figures in my life, and we became estranged. There are three people I'm thinking of over the course of my life where this has happened. And that estrangement is still present. We're not in any kind of connection currently, and have not been for many years. And I think that I feel like I had a choice in those choice points. Like there wasn't a clear resolution about how to repair things, how to repair relationships with these people. And actually, two of the three I didn't really want in my life anymore. But I also didn't want to carry forward anger, hatred, and bitterness, which would have been very easy to do in these situations for me. That was how I felt actually for a long time with some of these relationships. And so I think that why you might wonder, why do I consider this a success if we're still estranged? Because I feel like I have held on to my sanity and humanity, and I don't hold these individuals in contempt. I attempt to be compassionate, and I've done a lot of different practices over the years, including Ho'oponopono, to help get to more of a space of equanimity. And as I'm even talking these words, all these different other situations come to mind. You know, a coworker who was brutally raped and murdered. You know, my dad who was really violent and abusive to my mom, and just different situations. They can easily turn us, you know, to hatred. And I did live with some of that for a long time. And I think the main thing that I had to learn was forgiveness. And that I had to learn forgiveness didn't make what they did okay, but it did set me free. So I didn't really believe that was possible at first, but I did get there. And maybe it's not even just forgiveness for the terrible acts. It's not really forgiveness for the terrible acts these people did, but more so on a bigger plane is forgiveness for all the ways in which we're terribly human, including forgiveness for myself. And I'll pass to Marian.
So this would have been a nephew back on the East Coast, and he's a Trumplican, and he was talking about there'd been something, I think, on TV, and he said, yeah, all they needed was a good guy with a gun against the bad guy. And I went, hang on, what about Uvalde? And he said, well, you know, that was defunding the police. If they hadn't defunded the police. I went, hold on, that was Texas. And he backed off. He was getting very amped up, and I was remaining calm, and I was just happy that I was sort of able to get a little bit of and maintain without just avoiding, just going, oh, there he goes again, and not even engaging. So challenging moment, but I felt I stepped up to the plate and maybe opened a mind a crack. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what Marion accomplished there was, a tactic that always works to get people out of the, trench warfare and out into no man's land and play ball. Like, I guess that actually did happen in the First World War, is by a willingness to listen and ask questions rather than jump in. This conflict, this struggle between humanity and sanity. I think the solution is to put humanity first. That everybody is a person who has their own story, and then we're all, and maybe as far as the sanity thing is, maybe we're all a little bit insane, but we don't know it, but none of us are perfect. And I find myself, whether I engage in a conversation with somebody who, doesn't agree with me, or I don't, either way, I walk away feeling, if I didn't challenge, then I kick myself for not, that person needed to be challenged and I didn't step up to the plate to do it. Why? And then I'm kicking myself. Or if I did challenge, I walk away often thinking, God, I wish I hadn't said that. Then, that's ruined our relationship. So there's always this struggle between, who said earlier, between the humanity and the sanity thing. And I think we can't walk away from it. Just say that struggle is not easy, and we just have to take it on and hope we can have that game out in no man's land that happened during trench warfare in the First World War. So that's my hope, that that there's enough people who that I hear in this, what I hear today is people. If there's more people that think the way I hear you folks do, there's lots of hope.
Richard, you're on.
Thank you. So, able to hold on to sanity and humanity. It's for me, it takes work. Going through some of those things with expectations and really wanting things to work out a certain way, and they don't, because humanity gets in the way. But what did it take to overcome that? for that side of the question, for me, it was really about learning. Learn some new tools, learn new ways of looking at things. More about becoming the observer of what is rather than being engaging as the player on the field, getting hooked emotionally, and then just running around the field like an idiot. So the impact on self and others was, well, obviously, speaking back towards, well, one of the tools was, again, a nonviolent communication, which is a compassionate form of communication. It's very simple in concept, but it's not easy to perform. It takes a lot of practice because why? Well, I'm human and I've been programmed. Culture, society, my family, and we weren't raised generally speaking that language or even that concept of how to connect with others. But it had huge impact. Because the first thing to do is self balance. Okay, what are my feelings and needs? Wow, recognizing what those are. In fact, the needs are often hidden. But boy, an unmet need can really end up with a lot of bad behavior. But once the self-balancing is completed, there's a sense of peace. There is a sense of inner harmony. And what a great tool. But it also allowed me to be self-authentic. I get to be myself. I don't have to conform in any way to other expectations. How does that, it's about self-discovery and tapping into something beyond self, almost a sense of divinity, where the answers truly lie, and being open to that. So it's kind of a spiritual experience. So it's moving from, so the impact is moving from a lot of rightness, wrongness, blame, and shame, more towards understanding and awareness. But without judgment of others, well, judgments exist, they'll always exist. Not getting hooked by those judgments, which means being a little more connected with the reality of situations, but not being attached. Big difference. Wow. So that was a growth experience. Still not walking on water yet. I keep trying, but I'll keep working on it. But the bottom line for me is just expect humans to be human, including myself, and have compassion. Have compassion for self, have compassion for others. And that tool of empathy and NVC is, to me, a really handy tool to have. So I forget who said this. Was it Anthony DeMello? It's really about losing your mind and coming to your senses. Getting out of that thought world. I mean, Jesus often spoke of this world and not of this world. You cannot be of this world and enter into the kingdom. He called it heaven. To me, it's just more of enlightenment and spiritual peace. You cannot be of this world and be there with all that chatter and strategy and rightness and wrongness. So, sometimes in the board experience I talked about earlier, and also through relationships and a divorce years ago. And I love this saying, sometimes we win and sometimes we learn. And if we learn, we never lose. Was that Debbie Ford in Spiritual Divorce? What a great author. I really like her writings. So my idea is the chaos will always be out there. The circus parade will always be going by. And I can just let it pass by and enjoy the ride. Not get hooked, enjoy the ride. Thank you.
Pass to you, Jimmy.
Okay, I see that time is running down for us, so I'm going to be very quick. The context that was challenging for me is a workplace situation where, I was an administrator and, the boss came up to me one day and was trying to get me to do something with respect to a given policy or regulation. And I knew right away that it wasn't cool to do that. So the question is, what do I tell my boss? Yes or no? And it's not easy telling your big boss yes or no. It's not an easy thing. And that was a very challenging situation. But I decided that I was going to take the high road in this particular case anyway. And so I told him, well, I'm sorry, we can't do that because I gave the reasons why and all that. And I thought he would give me a can full of, ash and trash, they call it. but I was very pleasantly surprised that he said, hey, okay, thanks for telling me that. And that was the end of it. But I think we are all in different situations, different contexts. We're often called upon to make a decision about what's right and what's not right. And I don't know. I'm hoping that in all situations we have the courage, if you will, to make the right call. And so, Roger, I just want to say very quickly that being a warrior is about having courage. Not only in that kind of situation, but also in respect to yourself. Anyway, that's my story. Thank you for letting me share.
I'll try to find some courage. It ain't
All
easy.
right, good for you.
I'd like to just say about a book I read called The Cultural Creatives, which talks about the connections that people have who have very different viewpoints, how many they have that are similar. Raising kids, having a family, being nice to people, being observant, all these things. And the other thing, so I think that's a really interesting concept that made a lot of sense when I read that book. And I met the authors on Kauai some years ago. The other thing that book says is when 10% of the people get something, it's on its way to becoming mainstream. And when 20% of the people get it, it is mainstream. Because most of the rest of the people are just rolling by. And so to me, we don't have to go out and convince everybody to change their minds and do what's right. If we have a sense of what's right, what's appropriate, we know what it is, then let's preach to the choir more, and let's choose our battles with a few that maybe we can turn them around when we find it. But don't feel like, because I think this is an oppressive thought for all of us, that we got to change the minds of the 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump. We don't have to do that to get the change we want to see. I think we already have 10%, and we're on our way to more of people who are really willing to make some meaningful changes. So that's helped me.
And I will keep this really short too, but I kind of had a intentional conversation with a Trump supporter. This is while he was still in office, where we both decided we wanted to just hear each other's side, and that we agreed kind of up front, we're not going to try and change each other's minds. We're not going to try to, if we start to get argumentative, we would back off and just try to really just peel apart some things and just try to understand each other's side. And it was a really memorable conversation. I mean, I just felt like in the end, I mean, I still didn't understand one bit how she could possibly support somebody who I felt was just so toxic. And but we had a very harmonious conversation because we had set those rules ahead of time. And in the end, we concluded we both really just wanted to have a peaceful community. And I still don't understand how we could possibly have a peaceful community with a leader like that. But it was just a very memorable conversation. I feel like we should have more of that. So that's it.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm just gonna have us do a quick closing and to thank everyone for adding to our collective wisdom of what it takes. I'm just gonna ask that we all just bow to each other at the same time. And then I'll pass it back to Marina or Jimmy to wrap up the meeting.
Thanks, Jess. And thank you all for being here and for sharing so generously when it was your turn. I guess with the few minutes that we've got, I just remind us that part of the reason for having this style of conversation today was because Wheatley talks about holding on to our sanity and humanity by creating islands of sanity. That concept of creating spaces for the kind of conversation we've had here to happen. She doesn't talk about using circles, but we put the idea of circles together with the idea of using the concept of islands of sanity as the place where we make room for our humanity with each other. And that's one of the ways that we can be in service to the world these days, whether it's a conversation with one other, many of which we described today, or actually creating spaces and circles in our homes, in our communities, in our workplaces, and being intentional about it. Just like, you see there's some ritual, there's some intention, there's structure, there's form. It's not by accident that the conversation had the feel that it had. It was by design. And so the idea of perhaps investigating the possibility that circles is something that we can all use in our own lives, and we could possibly imagine leading in the places where we think others would like to gather with us for deep and meaningful conversations. So this was just a chance to try it on, walk around in it, see how it works and how they operate and how you feel about them. So I guess I would just, without inviting us to get too much into our heads again and maybe stay in our hearts, to open the space before we close today, just about how this conversation felt to you, whether or not this was a good use of your time, and what your if there's something you're taking away. So how this felt, and is there something you're taking away from our conversation? And perhaps we can just go ahead and, for the sake of process, just follow the same order that's in the chat of our circle. And if you don't have something to share, you might pass. But if you do, what are you taking away from today? And what did I ask? I just asked a question. I can't remember what I asked you. Just well, how did you feel about our how we spent our time today? And is there something you're taking away from this? So with that, can we begin with you, Jess?
Sure. I'll just say that I really appreciated everyone's depth of story, and that you feel less alone and you pick up some valuable wisdom from other people's experiences, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm taking away some enthusiasm that it worked as well as it felt like it did in our first voyage like this. And if I had been facilitating live with a marker and flip chart, I think there were a lot of really practical ideas that people described in that second round about what they did when they were able to hold on to humanity and sanity. That is more tools for my tool belt, and reminders of various ways that I can be effective in moments where I'm starting to feel nervous about that. So thank you all.
Thanks, Marina. I came away with surprise. I had no intention of talking about any of that stuff. So the questions helped because they prompted me to go places I had not planned to go in this group or this company. And I felt completely safe in talking about these things. And I also connected with other stories in lots of ways about, being gay and shunned and politically and medically, I mean, everybody's talked about stories that I could connect with, regardless of where we are in our own individual lives. I only focused on a couple of moments trying to answer the question, but there was nothing that felt outside of my experience or interest or concern. And so that was wonderful.
I think I come up next. What impressed me in the end was how, even though it's not the focus precisely of the question, namely, what techniques might you use? Techniques emerge. And Helen, you're the one that impressed me so much when you said in the beginning, because it summarized perfectly when to hold them and when to fold them. And I think that's a very important technique that needs to be explored and elaborated on. Maybe we can do that in future meetings.
I feel grateful for everyone's wisdom here today and honesty. And I think what I'm taking away is some encouragement.
Yeah, the authenticity, I think, is the first word that comes to mind. Just appreciate everybody just being their authentic selves and sharing from, really kind of deep personal stories. I appreciated that. Mahalo.
Just the beauty of establishing a very simple rule, knowing that everybody can get to speak. Personally, I'm able to speak without worrying about being interrupted and trying to get back in the game. And then playing my role, and everybody else played the role perfectly, is listen completely to what the other person has to say. If we can manage doing that with people that we disagree with, then we'll come a long way.
Okay, yeah, what an eye opener. What a neat kind of thing to do and have a circle and just be aware of other people's experiences and the vicarious learning that takes place. I really enjoy that. Kind of like a little spiritual adventure on Saturday. And but it also feels very encouraging to see the number of people that are interested in mindfulness. So, with appreciation and aloha and mahalo. Thank you.
Well, first off, Jess and Marina, thank you for a wonderful job today. I think the session was a good example of what could happen in a larger network of so-called warriors, if you will. I don't like to use the word too much, but if we had more warriors and we had more networks, more islands of sanity, I think that would be great. One of the things that came up for me was how much all the elements, the different pieces of the conversation, all reflected on the commonality of our humanity. We all are engaged in the same experience, if you will. The challenges of relating, the challenge of thinking, the challenges of acting. And I think the circles practice that we had to do says a lot about the possibility of us finding clarification and reinforcement in a larger community. In other words, you don't have to do it by yourself. You can share it, and you can have people support you in terms of not agreeing with you, but encouraging you to say what's on your mind and what you're experiencing. And I think that's the value of it. And I think that's what we need in our society. And what I think we're about to do is very important for a whole lot of people all over the place. And the sooner we get to a place where we can begin to offer it to more people, I think the better it will be. But I enjoyed today. I mean, I don't know if I contributed in any way, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was good to see Roger too, by the way, and Richard. Good to see you, and Carl, and Liz, and Deb, and Helen. Helen and I are working on another project as well. So a lot of things going on here.
And Marion and Art.
What am I, chopped liver, Jimmy?
All right,
Yeah,
Jimmy.
try. You're in education. We're gonna have to work.
Jimmy, let us finish this circle with the last two people gonna go. Roger.
Sorry.
I don't know if I like seeing Helen. I didn't follow her advice last time I talked to her. And I paid the price, Helen. Anyway, I'd love to talk to you again. Yeah, it was really nice to be here. I'm reminded of, and I was just talking about the 10% and speaking to the choir. And I'm reminded of a Sufi adventure I was at one time, a Sufi zikr, where we took an hour just to recite something over and over again. And at the end, the leader said, look, let's all pray that one of us here really got something meaningful out of this. And I thought, isn't that nice? It takes all the pressure off of me to have to go somewhere, but at least I participated in being a speck, in lighting a little bit of a fire. So thank everyone for that too.
I'll just keep it really short, and I just feel like it's kind of like a little island of sanity just to be here and this couple hours of just being reminded and inspired that there are other people who really do care and who want to affect some kind of positive change. And just thank you all for sharing and being here.
Thanks, everybody. And so as we come to this close, I remind you that it would be so lovely to have you participate, if you can, in these next 3 months of the Margaret Wheatley Study Group, which will be the first Wednesday of each month from 6:30 to 8 p.m. If you're not sure if you have information about it, just be in touch. Jess, can you throw our email, well, yours or mine, into the chat for someone? And then I'm just reminded, so I think the circles really came to me knowing that Jess had experience with circles after Michael Carroll from the Wisdom Seat came and presented for us a few months ago about warrior-ship in response to a number of people, a handful of people expressing concern about that concept. And if you haven't seen the video of his talk, it was really worthwhile. And I was taken when, Wheatley talks about this being a thing leaders can do, meaning, being warriors is something that leaders can do in a time when you can't do what you used to do, make the changes you used to be about changing or advocating for the things you used to advocate. And he gave a very different take on it and said, I'm misquoting him, but I'm paraphrasing. He said, like warrior-ship is the courage to recognize the power of your own presence. The power of your own presence and the amount that the world needs that, and the places that allow you to be that. So circles seemed like a place where we could all step up to our own presence and sort of, as a contagion, invite others to be present as well. And so with that simple notion of warrior-ship and what we were here to do today, just thank you so much for this delicious little time that we spent. And Jimmy, I'll turn it to you now because I know we're a bit over time and it's the end of.
Because there's a lot of things going on in people's lives, but let me just say that that without your participation, our fledgling movement, if you will, on spreading mindfulness will not pick up steam. So wherever you go, please talk up the possibility of recruiting people to be part of our network. and they can very easily sign on to getting emails and notices from us, and also encourage people to participate in some of our conversations. And by the way, Michael from the Wisdom Seat, I think we'll be here in 2004, and when he comes, we will all have a sit-down conversation with him about warriorship, mindfulness, and how we go about subtly changing the world.
24 maybe, not oh,
Huh? What's that?
2024, not 2004.
Oh, did I say that? Oh my God. I must be old.
It's only 20 years, Jimmy. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, all right. I'll still be young.
All in a
Aloha,
number.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Mahalo.
Have a
Aloha.
wonderful Saturday.
Mahalo. Thank you,
Thank you.
Maria.
Aloha. Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much.
Mhm.